I'd like to welcome everyone to today's presentation. Once again, I'm Ed Zamora from Principia Prep, and today we're going to be going over the college aid prep presentation for sophomores and juniors. So essentially getting you guys ready for the juniors for senior year coming up in a couple months here, as well as for the sophomores, getting you guys ready for junior year. That being said, let's jump right into the outline of today's presentation. We will be discussing the landscape of the college environment, both admissions and financial aid, things to look out for, things you should be doing, things that you don't need to be doing, scams, pitfalls, some other stuff. I will give you guys a little bit of a basis, like a foundation of the understanding of financial aid forms, as well as how the SAT optional situation is being affected now in the world of admissions and also the financial aid aspects of it as well. That being said, one thing that I do advise a lot of parents on is that we do have a YouTube channel, and it actually has a lot of videos. I believe we have 185 college videos now on YouTube, basically explaining the entire college process. I have videos on there that discuss state aid, federal aid, Pell Grants, finding scholarships, establishing in-state residency for out-of-state schools, a lot of different guides to basically follow along when you guys are filling out the financial aid forms. And on the channel, one of the things we are doing, and we've done this now for 2 years, and next year will be the third year we're doing this, is we have a memorial scholarship on YouTube, which is called the James Russo Memorial Scholarship. Every year we try to give out as much money as possible. And the money that we get from YouTube, for you guys watching the videos and letting the commercials run, that's what actually funds this scholarship here. So if you guys go to YouTube, once again, just type my name in, Ed Zamora. That will bring up our channel, and you can see all the different videos out there that we have on the college process, as well as one of the videos is the James Russo Memorial Scholarship, explaining how our scholarship program works for senior students going off to college. So if you want to be part of our scholarship program, very simple, just go on YouTube, watch the James Russo Memorial Scholarship. It gives you the information and breakdown of how our scholarship works. And all that being said, let's jump right into one of the big topics that a lot of sophomore and junior parents, especially now in the spring, are kind of discussing and trying to figure out is, where do we even start? I guess you know what I'm saying? As far as there's so much information out there, so many resources, and families can be overwhelmed with everything out there. Now, right at the bat, I tell families all the time, whether it's right now your student's junior or right now they're a sophomore, you have plenty of time. There's no rush right now. If you don't know what school they want to apply to or what school they want to go to or what major they want to study, not a problem. The reality is, of the 4,000 plus colleges out there, many students that go to many of the higher end schools, many of the name brand schools call it, most students on average will change their major or transfer at least 3 times within their college, basically educational path. So if a student's not sure where they want to go just yet, not a problem. They may end up changing their mind later on, even after they've been accepted, and go to another school. Or if they're not sure what they want to study, also not a problem. They have plenty of time to figure these things out. What I typically tell students and parents is when you're figuring out the college list, the reality is most of the time when you're building your list together, I wouldn't stop building the list until probably around, I would say June or July of junior year going into senior year. So right before senior year starts, you should still be considering other colleges. You might have your core list of schools you really want to apply to, but there's no stopping you from continue to add to that list. I'm going to talk about in today's presentation how to build a college list as well. Also, if your student doesn't get into their top tier choice school, or your student isn't academically sound to the point where they can get into schools they want to get into, that's also not a problem either. A lot of students sometimes take a little bit more time than other students, whether it be in high school or a year or so in college, to kind of figure out their path. That being said, the reason I say if your student's not ready to go to college, or maybe is not yet in the mix of needing to know where they want to go, or they haven't done well academically in college, or sorry, in high school, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world per se. To give you an example, this guy right here, Steve Jobs, obviously one of the co-founders of Apple, didn't do very good in high school. He did terrible in high school. He had a 2.65 GPA. Horrendous, especially nowadays. If you had a 2.65 GPA, you're not going anywhere really, but maybe community college, because at this point in time, admissions is crazy competitive. So 265 is not going to get it done anywhere, almost any college. Now, obviously later on in life, he figured out his path and found his way, but it showed that your student doesn't have to go to the top tier colleges to succeed in life. They also don't need to know what they need to be doing or want to do major-wise right now. They have plenty of time to kind of figure these things out. Which also brings me to one of the main topics I deal with, especially right now with senior parents and students, is I didn't get in my top school, or I didn't get in my top 2 or 3 schools. What do we do? You know, it's the end of the world type situation. It's not the end of the world, believe it or not. If your student doesn't get into their number 1 school, their number 2 or number 3 school, it's not the end of the world. The reality is, like I mentioned before, There's over 4,000 colleges out there. There are colleges for every student out there. What I have on the screen now is basically a snapshot. Which colleges produce the most Fortune 500 CEOs? As you can see at the top, we have Harvard and Stanford, Columbia, UPenn, etc. The standard schools names you would expect to see for Fortune 500 CEOs where they went to college. But the interesting fact is, if you look a little bit further down, you'll see that you have Indiana University and Rutgers University with 11 CEOs, more Fortune 500 CEOs than MIT. So the reality is your student doesn't need to go into the top 5 most difficult schools, the top 10 most difficult schools in the world, or for their major to be successful. The reality is for most students here in the Northeast, most of the time for an Indiana or a Rutgers University, this is typically our target school. In some cases, our safety schools for many of our students here in the tri-state area. So the reality is, it's not really where your student goes most of the time, believe it or not. It's what they do when they're there. Any college a student goes to, as long as they maximize the opportunities available to them while they're on campus, the internships, the co-ops, the networking, and so on and so forth, they'll be able to be successful in their career path. If they don't do these things, then it doesn't really matter where they go to school if they don't utilize all the resources available to them. But if they do, it's very likely they can also be successful without having to go to an Ivy League school or a top 5, top 10 program for their major. They can still find their academic path, i.e. their career path, which also brings us to, well, where do we even start? There's over 4,000 colleges. We have no idea where to even start. We're starting to build our college list. We have some ideas of what we want to study or where we want to be region-wise, so on and so forth, but we're still kind of trying to figure everything out. Very simple. First place I would go if I was a new parent trying to figure out building a college list, and not just building a list from the perspective of, who has my major and how far they are, but building a list to get kind of an entirety of information, I would be going here to collegeboard.org. At the bottom of the screen here, you can see the link here. On collegeboard.org, one of the benefits is, let's say your student comes home. You say, Mom, Dad, I want to go look at Oberlin or Swarthmore or Pomona or Harvey Mudd or McGill, and you have no idea what they're talking about. Or they want to go see Tisch or SCAD or Mika, and you're just completely lost. No idea what they're talking about. You can say, honey, that's great. Let's talk about it after dinner. Write the school's name down, whatever name they give you. Go to College Board. On College Board, on the top right-hand corner, the benefit of College Board is on the search bar up there on the right, you can type in any school's name. And what will happen is the school will pop up a profile of all the information available for that college. Now, the funny thing is, almost every student looking to go to college at any level, community college all the way up to Harvard, and everyone in between, every student is utilizing College Board for information or for signing up for the SATs or the PSAT stuff or the AP stuff. But almost no parents use the College Board site, which doesn't make any sense to me, because parents should be on the College Board site realistically more than the students, to be honest with you. Now, when it comes to going to College Board, one of the benefits is if you already know a school the student wants to go to or look at. And by the way, every student typically wants to go either south or they want to go to Boston. That's like the criteria of every Northeastern student. I want to go to Boston or I want to go south. That's right. Like 9 out of 10 students fall into that category. Let's just say your student says, I want to look at BU. So you plug in BU, and the benefit of plugging BU here in College Board is right at the top on the About and the Admissions page links, which you can see right there in the bottom left, it will start breaking down information for you. How big is BU? Where's it located? Is it co-ed? For the admissions side, what's the average SAT score? What's the average ACT score? What kind of student do they have coming in from a GPA perspective? So you can start figuring out, is this school a possibility for us to get in based on my student's academic path as a sophomore or junior so far? Are we on the path to maybe getting in? Or do we need to do more work? Or are we in a safety school perspective where we're like a guaranteed to get in situation here? This is one of the benefits of College Board. It starts kind of figuring out for you with the research you're doing on College Board, where you guys fall in the mix of getting into the college. In addition to the About and Admissions, you also have the academics and costs, which indicate to you what majors are offered at this college. So your student says to you, I want to become a marine biologist. And you go in there and you find out they don't have marine biology, or they want to be an accountant and they don't have accounting, or they want to go into engineering and they don't have engineering. These are all the things you can make sure that the school at least has the major we're considering. Now, by the way, BU has a lot of these majors. So just giving you an example, you just want to go through the academics and figure out, are we going to the right place? Are we building the right school list before we even visit these colleges? On the cost tab on the left, What it will show you is a breakdown of every college's costs: tuition costs, room and board costs, book costs, transportation costs, miscellaneous costs, which are new student fees, technology fees, insurance fees, etc. So it gives you a breakdown of the entire cost of the school for you guys, which is obviously a good thing to start with to know what kind of numbers are we dealing with here. Also on the cost side, it also shows you how generous this college is. Does it offer scholarship money based on our students' academic profile, GPA, and test scores? Does it also offer grant money if we have financial need to attend a college? And of course, campus life talks about the social aspects of the school. But as a parent, if you go here and you research all this stuff, literally in 5 to 10 minutes, you can have a very good foundational understanding of the schools your students considering. Also on the profile for every college you look up, on there will be a list of additional colleges that students apply to that also apply to BU. So if your student says, what other schools should we consider? If you look at BU, it'll give you a list of 5 to 10 additional schools students are applying to. So in the back of your mind, you already know what additional schools your student yourself may want to start looking at as well. Great way to build your wealth of knowledge. So Collegeboard is probably one of the first places I'd be utilizing, in addition to obviously your guidance office, your college advising office at the high school, which knows your student very well. But if I'm home, it's summer break, or it's during spring break, and I want to start doing some research myself, you can jump on Collegeboard anytime. It's a great wealth of information. Which brings us to the SAT, ACT situation, since we're talking about Collegeboard here. Now, when it comes to the SAT, ACT, right around March 2020, when the pandemic was kind of starting up, unfortunately, COVID and everything else, that's when almost every single college went SAT, ACT optional. And it was a huge benefit for students from a few different perspectives. Right off the bat, no student could even take a test in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, et cetera, because no tests were being held. So huge benefit for us there that we didn't have to utilize that. Now, the SAT, ACT optional situation has continued for a lot of schools, especially a lot of high-end schools, have continued using the SAT, ACT situation as far as not having to take the test or not having to submit the test for admissions consideration. Now, the benefit of the SAT optional is if your student doesn't score well, testing, any kind of testing at all, SAT, ACT, etc., this could be a component to kind of take that off the table so it's not used against you. Now, obviously, if your student doesn't score well and you're looking for SAT, ACT optional colleges, I would definitely go to this website right here, fairtest.org. On fairtest.org, it allows you, by going on here, to see a list in alphabetical order of schools, or even in state order of schools, which colleges are SAT, ACT optional. So obviously a big benefit for families out there, or for students specifically, who do not score well on standardized tests. Now, that's the benefit of a lot of schools have stayed SAT optional. The negative aspect of SAT, ACT optional is that it has expanded the competition level through the roof. Just to give an example, NYU has received in 3 years, 3 consecutive years, over 100,000 applications for admissions for freshman year, which is an enormous number. UCLA received 145,000 applications just for UCLA. So we're talking about an enormous increase in applications because students don't have that barrier anymore, unfortunately, of the SAT, ACT situation. So if you're considering going SAT, ACT optional, perfectly fine if you guys aren't anywhere near the scores required based on either your guidance office helping you or talking to the admissions office or going on a Naviance and seeing what the median score is from your school for the SAT, ACT. If we're anywhere near that median score for the testing, then I can see doing SAT, ACT optional. But if you are doing that, I would suggest sending your test scores in, sending your applications in as soon as possible. So as an example, applications due, let's say, November 1st, senior year, which is typically a big deadline, November 1st, either early action or rolling or restricted early action or early decision, any of those. I would be sending my application in end of September, only because I want to get ahead of the pack. I want to get ahead of my competition, because the longer you wait, the closer you get to November 1st, the more applications they already have. So the reality is, if you're going SAT, ACT optional, you're technically in the largest application pool of all application pools. But to give you kind of a breakdown of admissions works like this. It's one giant pool of applications. Within that giant pool are small puddles of applications. The athletes, the first generation, the students from the West Coast, students international, perfect SAT scores, the engineer kid, the nursing kid, so on and so forth, all these little puddles. The biggest puddle of the pond is the SAT, ACT optional student, because it's the biggest amount of applications coming in. So if I don't have to be in that group, if I can send my test scores in, I would rather go down the path of sending my test scores in. Okay, but just things to think about as you go through the process. Which brings us to building a college list. I typically get the same question from all sophomores and juniors is, how many schools should be on my college list? And it's all based on preference, to be honest with you. But normally a college list is between 6 to 10 schools. That's like a normal list, 6 to 10 schools. And let me explain what I mean by a normal list. Now, if you have a student who's looking at engineering or physical therapy or pharmacy, or a very difficult, more competitive nursing kind of program, something that's very competitive to get into, then you're probably going to have more than 10 schools. If your student is undecided and has no idea what they want to study, or they want to study business, which in many cases is the fallback for undecided, so they really don't know what they want to study, but they want to go into business, then your list should really be in that 6 to 10, 8 to 12 scenario. I wouldn't go much higher than 12, especially if you're considering a lot of schools that are likely to let you in. Let me explain to you how the school list kind of gets built together. When you're building a school list, the foundations of building a school list, like the prefaces for starting, you will have your safety schools, which are the guaranteed in, like 95% chance our students are going to get in. You can figure that out either by talking to the school's admissions office or your own school's college advising guidance office. They can also advise you of if it's a safety school or not, but it's basically a guaranteed in. Then next level, you have the target schools. When it comes to target schools, these are like the 50-50 schools. The schools your student has a 50% chance of getting into, but not guaranteed, but still a pretty high acceptance rate here. Now that should be, in most cases, the bulk of your list. And then you have the last part, which is the reach colleges, which are typically the dream schools, the more difficult schools, the ones where your student might be there, but isn't quite there to make it a target school. Now, let me give you an example of building a list. Typically, if I'm looking at 8 colleges on my list, I have 2 safety schools, I have 4 target schools, and I have 2 reach schools. So the middle of the pack here, the targets, where I feel comfortable percentage-wise, should be the bulk of your list. If you're looking at reach schools, another thing to kind of consider, and I talk about all these breakdowns of these topics and ways of thinking and admissions on the YouTube channel videos, by the way, in more depth than I will be today. Now, when it comes to reach schools, you really need to realize that most people think it's safety, target, reach. That's not really the way a list works, but I just give you that as the foundational starting point. The reality is you have safeties, you have target reach, you have reach, and then the reach breaks down into more categories. You have attainable reach, and then you have never going to happen reach. Let me explain what I mean by these two. Attainable reach is the school, typical student gets accepted, has 5 APs, your student has 4 APs. The typical test score is 1,400, your student has 1,350. That's an attainable reach. A non-attainable reach is, let's call like a Harvard, which has a 3% acceptance rate. If your student has never taken a dual credit course or an AP course or an IB course, and I mean never taken, or has taken 1 or 2, Harvard's not going to accept you. Even if your student scores perfectly on the SATs, they're still not going to take you because the rigor of the schedule is not there. So that would be a never going to happen reach school. Now you can still apply. I'm not saying you can't apply, but it should be understood that it's like a Hail Mary inside of a Hail Mary inside of a Hail Mary type situation. It's just never going to happen because the competition level now is astronomical. So just things to think about. Because I do see sometimes, this is rare, but I do see it, where a student wants to apply to all the Ivy League schools, which is up to you, perfectly fine. And they'll apply, let's say, 10 Ivy League level schools. And I mean Ivy League level, I mean like 7-8% acceptance rate or below. And they'll have like 1 safety school. That is not a proper school list. You cannot have 10, 8% acceptance rates and 1 you're guaranteed in, because competition now is so crazy. You might, and more likely, unfortunately, will be rejected by all the high-end schools, and you have 1 backup, which you might not even want to go to. So it's not the way to build a school list. Reach schools are fine, but you have to have targets in place just in case the dream schools don't work out. Which brings us to the financial aid way of doing this as well, because this is all financial aid admissions, by the way, are now basically the same thing nowadays. Now, when you're building a school list, one of the things that almost every family kind of harpers on and looks at is, what's the highest school can we get into? What about the target schools? How equivalent are they to the reach school? Which is fine, you can do that, but nobody ever looks at the safety school as an important component, which they should. The component of a safety school should not just be, we don't get anywhere else, we got to go here. The component of the safety school should also be, a backup of the backup, obviously, but a backup that gives us a lot of scholarship money because we're willing to go to a little bit of lower tier than want to. And the way you figure that out, very simple. Contact the school's admissions office and start asking questions about scholarship money. I'm going to address this in another slide or two, but things to think about from the safety schools are, we're going to get it, but are they going to give us money here? Because they are going to give us scholarship money based on our students' academic profile, grades, test scores, etc. This money can be used in two ways. Number one, if we do end up going here, we're going to get a sizable discount. We should also look at that offer as an additional negotiation chip where we can take this negotiated money, the money we've already gotten, the scholarship, and negotiate against a target school, or maybe negotiate against a reach school to see what all the money they can provide based on this safety school for us, giving us a good scholarship. So safety schools are the backups, yes, but they're also the guaranteed leveraging tools available to start considering negotiating with the scholarship. Now, that being said, let's talk admission. Now, I get this question all the time from the juniors and the sophomores. We're considering doing early decision, but we're not sure because if we do early decision, we're going to be locked in. We got to go. And are they going to just basically say to us, we're not going to give you any financial aid help. We're not going to give you any grant money because we already have you. It's not really the way it works, believe it or not. For those who are new to this whole process, you have early action, which means you apply early as a senior student. You get in, but you don't have to go. Then you have early decision, which means you apply early, you get in, you're binded, you have to go. And one of the things that scares a lot of parents is if we're binding and we're basically saying, if you accept us, we're going, how do we make sure that we're going to get enough financial assistance for us to feel comfortable, not just sending them to school, but also even applying to early decision? And the answer is very simple. You guys do the net price calculators. I have a slide just for that. In about 2 more slides, I'll go more in depth. The net price calculators give you a peace of mind in a sense that it shows you how much that specific school will give you in financial assistance. So either they're going to be at the number you feel comfortable or they're not. It's not going to be a gray area. They're either going to be generous to the point where you feel okay applying as an ED, or they're going to basically say, we're not going to give you anything, or we're going to give you a little bit of money, but maybe not what you're looking for. So the net price calculators are really the goal, the key from the financial point of view of figuring out, does this make sense for us financially speaking, for us to then go into the admissions side and say, yes, let's move forward with the early decision. Now, obviously, those new to the admissions process, early decision does increase your chances of getting accepted to the college, in some cases by 50% or more. So there's a big deal at the higher end schools, the more reach schools, the more difficult schools to get into, to look to do early decision. Now, with that being said, all of you guys on the call, the sophomores, the juniors, and so on and so forth, you guys are all here obviously wondering, when do we start filling out the financial aid forms? When do the forms actually become available? And the answer is very simple. You guys will not be doing any financial aid forms until the earliest time would be October 1st of senior year. So for junior parents, 2023, this October, you guys will be doing your first financial aid forms. For sophomore parents, 2024, October 1st, is when you guys will be doing your financial aid forms. And when I say financial aid forms, I mean the starting forms of filling out for financial aid, the FAFSA form, which every college needs, and the CSS profile, which some colleges need. So up until October senior year, you guys theoretically are not filling out any financial aid forms. However, this is where it gets a little tricky. Even though you're not filling out any official financial aid forms until senior year, October 1st and after, the first time you guys are asked about financial aid questions actually begins in the junior summer before senior year starts. On the screen, we have the Common App. On the Common application, as well as the Coalition application, Rutgers State application, Texas application, Florida application, California application, basically all the applications, no matter what it is, now ask the same question. And I highlighted the question down below. The question is, do you intend to apply for need-based financial aid? And every parent over the summer, I get a lot of phone calls and emails. Ed, why is the Common application asking us if we're applying for need-based aid? Will they use this question against us for admissions consideration? And the answer is 95% no, they're not going to use it against you. And then 5% yes, they are going to use it against you. Let me explain what I mean by that. Almost every college out there is what's known as need blind. They don't care if you can afford it. But there is a small section, small percentage of schools that are need aware, which means they are looking at the family's ability to pay for college as part of the consideration of admissions. Now, if you want to find out, is the college we're looking at, are they need aware or are they need blind? You know, do they care? or do they not care? Very simple. Call the school's admissions office and just ask them right over the phone. Is your school need aware or is your school need blind? If they're need aware, they care. If they're need blind, they don't care if you can afford the college or not. It's not going to be part of the consideration for admission. So obviously something to consider as you're going through this process, which brings us to the college tour, the visit, open house, etc. Now, almost every parent, almost every family, sophomores, juniors, freshmen, no matter what year you guys go, you guys almost always do this wrong. Now, let me explain what I mean by you do the college tour wrong. So you're probably wondering, how can we do this wrong? We go to the dorm room, we see the cafeteria, we see the lab. Everyone does the same thing. How can I be doing this wrong? The problem is that you are doing what everyone else is. That's where the problem lies. Let me explain. And I've probably done, I don't know, 50, 60, 100 open houses for the different colleges I've worked at. The way you want to do a college tour is not how everyone else does it. Yes, you want to go on the college tour and find out, do we like the dorm room? Do we like the cafeteria food? Do we socially feel comfortable? As a parent, do I feel a safety is here for my student? As a student, do I like the social aspects? Is my major going to be good here? So on and so forth. Yeah, that stuff you're all going to do, okay? But where you need to kind of separate from the pack is gathering information that is relevant to you, recognizing whether the school makes sense to apply. Let me explain what that means. When you set up an open house or a college tour, you should always ask the admissions office, will I be able to sit down with an admissions officer? And would I be also able to sit down with a financial aid officer? If they say yes to both, you're in great shape. This is what you want to do. You want to make sure to bring with you a copy of the student's unofficial transcript. The unofficial transcript can be gotten from the guidance office showing the classes they've taken, their GPA, as well as the classes they're going to be taking next academic year. Second, a copy of any test score, SAT, ACT, PSATs if you don't have those. Or you can go to any SAT, ACT tutor, any of them, Princeton, Kaplan, any of the private guys, and they'll all do, typically for free, in some cases a few bucks, but typically free, a diagnostic test to see where you're able to score on any of these tests, SAT or ACT. Bring that with you if you don't have a test score already. And then third, you want to bring with you a copy of the student's resume. The resume can just basically be bulletin points. It doesn't have to be perfect. It could be community service, volunteer work, work experience, clubs, sports. All this stuff should be on there. And then what you do is when you sit down in front of the admissions officer, you go, here's our transcript, here's our test scores, here's our resume. How would you apply to the college? Do you think early decision is a good idea? Do you think rolling admissions is a good idea for us to do it in September, October, November? Do you think it'd be a good idea to do restricted early action? Do you think it's better to do early decision 2 or early decision 1? This is the actual person in many cases that's reviewing your application. This is the perfect person to ask, how would you apply here based on our academic profile, our extracurricular activities, and our test scores? This is basically the perfect person because they're going to tell you directly what the answer is. They'll say to you, early decision is a competitive field for us, blah, blah, blah. Your student has, let's say, a 28 ACT or a 1320 SAT. Our typical student applying early decision has a 1450 SAT or a 34 ACT. That means don't apply with the test score, okay? Or they're going to say to you, based on your academic profile, we see you're a strong student for us, academically speaking. You're eligible for a scholarship. This is also the same place you can start building basically discounts. So when they say you're scholarship eligible, the next question should always be, what kind of money are we talking about? And by the way, when admissions says scholarship, they never give you a specific number. They give you a range. So I'm going to say to you, well, you're in the provost level, which is like 4 to 7, or you're in the trustee or the presidential, which is like 15 to 25. At which point I would say, okay, let's say we're at between 15 to 25. Let's say we're at 20. Can we increase the number if we take more high, let's call rigor classes in senior year, as far as APs, dual credit courses, so on and so forth, IBs? Or if the GPA just goes up by itself, just based on classes we're taking, can we get more? Or if our test score goes up, can we get more? You should be maximizing the scholarship opportunities here with the person who awards the scholarship money to. Second place you want to go is the financial aid office. And with the financial aid office, really only thing you need with you is one thing, the school's net price calculator. The net price calculator is essentially the tool that's online, which allows you to plug in your own tax information, as well as your assets, as well as your students' tax information and their assets to figure out how much money this school would give you based on your financial situation. You sit down with a financial aid officer and say, here's my net price calculator. How correct are these numbers? That way, this person, the financial aid officer, can go look at your numbers and go, as long as your income and assets are in this range, this is pretty much what we're going to give you. So you already know scholarships. You already know how to apply. You also know grant money availability, additional aid costs, discounts based on you doing the student tour here. So when everyone else's kid is basically saying, I love the school, I love the dorm, I love the social aspects, I love the lab and everything else, and so is your kid maybe, you can feel comfortable knowing that this is a school, we're going to get money. I feel comfortable saying, yes, let's move forward with applying here. Or you can say, look, the money doesn't seem to be here. We might want to kind of shift our gears here, maybe not apply here, or understand from a family perspective, if we get in and they don't give us the amount of money we need, we can't send you here. These are conversations you need to be having the entire time. I know it's difficult to realize that most students don't understand what $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 in costs are. I understand that. Believe me, I deal with teenagers all day long. And colleges now have become crazy expensive, where 50, 60,000 is kind of like the new norm, which is insane, all the way up to 90,000. But you have to have these conversations with your student, because right now I'll tell you the nightmare situation. And I've been doing this 25 years. It's not like I've been doing this for a few years. I've been doing this longer than your kids have even been alive, longer than maybe you've been married in many cases. The reality is the worst case scenario is what happens every year with every family from this perspective. You say to your student, go apply to college. And then they bring you in, the parent, the one paying for this basically, or helping to afford pay for this, they bring you in at the end. And then you have to figure out a way to either manage the cost or take on basically crippling financial debt. And this is what happens all the time. And the way I explain it is very simple. If you say to your student, when you turn 17 or 18, I don't know what age level students get driver's license now or get to cars now, but let's say it's 17. When you say to a 17-year-old, we're going to buy you a car, and you say to the 17-year-old, go find the car. And then you go to the car dealership after they picked up the car, and you sit down with the manager or the person doing the financing, let's call it. And they say to you, okay, your payments for the next 10 years, whatever long the loans are nowadays, is going to be $2,000 a month. And then you realize your kid just picked out a Ferrari. And you're wondering, where'd you come up with the idea of picking up a Ferrari? Very simple. You told the kid, go to apply to anywhere you want. Go pick out any car you want. If you don't want the Ferrari situation to happen, because you're thinking, look, we're looking at a Honda situation, then you need to tell the student from the get-go, you need to understand the financial aspects of this. And they have to be with you hand in hand. Not what happens, and this happens all the time. I'm talking about 25 years experience, this happens every year. You cannot just let the students apply to wherever they want. It doesn't make any sense, because then they fall in love with the most expensive schools. And then you become the bad guy, because in the beginning, you didn't say to them, if the school costs 90,000 and we don't reduce it down to 40 or 30 or 20, you can't go. You just say to them, apply and let's see what happens, is not a financial game plan. So from the whole get-go, you have to be in line with your student. It's got to be a team effort. This is what we feel comfortable paying. This is what we're not going to pay. If you get the school to this level, we're okay. So let's all do the research and figure out, can we get to these levels? Because the reality is schools, as I mentioned before, are no longer affordable. They've never really been affordable for maybe about 30 years now. But the reality is a lot of schools now, especially a lot of name brand schools, are all starting in a $70,000 price tag. I know it sounds insane, but that's the reality of the market we're in right now. Now, if you look here, a lot of students that apply here in the Northeast in certain schools they apply to, almost every high-level name brand school is now at 80,000 and above. Worst part about this is for the junior parents, these 80 or mid-80 schools will all cost around 90 grand for you guys. Let me explain how that happened, unfortunately. Every year, the school's price, and by the way, these are the school prices for this year, 22, 23. So for the senior year, for the seniors this year, 22, 23 graduating seniors, they're going to increase this price on you guys for the seniors right after you deposit. So you deposit by May 1st of senior year. Then the board of directors meets at the end of the school academic term for spring, which is usually like around May 20th, 25th. So right before June, they increase this price by 3 to 6%. which means for juniors, you have 2 increases, which means juniors will be the first class that sees schools that cost over $90,000, everything all included, room, board, books, etc. Now, obviously, I talk about these numbers for 2 reasons. Number one, the biggest admissions mistake I see in 25 years of doing this is always the same. You never look at the price tag and assume you can't afford it, because these schools here, a majority of students attending actually pay less than half the sticker price. So number one, you obviously have to know the price, but you have to do the research in figuring out, are these schools affordable to us to keep moving forward with applying? And then number two, you have to realize what these numbers mean. Because if the schools on your list are at the 70, 80, 90,000 call, let's call it, and the schools are not providing you aid, you have to have a game plan in place of knowing how you're going to pay this back, or how you're going to afford these numbers, 60, 70, 80, 90,000. Because if you don't have a game plan, that's the worst case scenario nowadays, unfortunately. Which brings us to, let's start with the game plan, the net price calculator. Every single school, I mean, all of them have net price calculators. Now, I use this slide here from Collegeboard because of the fact that most of the net price calculators, by the way, are on Collegeboard. So how does net price calculator work? Well, the way it works is this. It takes a specific school's financial calculations, how they look at you from a financial point of view, your income, your assets, etc., and they determine how much they're going to be able to give you in grants, in some cases also scholarship money. So what you do to find any school's net price calculator, because now they all have one, is just go to Google and type in any school's name. Lehigh net price calculator, Boston College net price calculator, or Fairleigh Dickinson net price calculator. And when it pops up on that school's profile is essentially 10 to 15 questions. They get right to the point, by the way. They basically just go like student's name, their age, okay, how much does mom and dad make? Like, you go right into it. And the calculator is going to basically show you how much that school is willing to offer you if your student wants to attend that college. Now, this is very beneficial, obviously, for the restricted early action or the early decision students considering being locked in, let's call it. This allows you to know if the college is going to be generous to us based on our financial consideration, our financial situation. I actually did a net price calculator to show you how easy these are to do, by the way. I did Harvard net price calculator because everyone knows Harvard, so I use Harvard for a lot of my exams. Harvard, everything all in, costs right around $82,000. Now, if you're a family of 4 with 1 student going off to college, and you guys have $50,000 in checking or savings, essentially, it's the equation I put into the form, it indicated for our family of 4 with 1 kid going to college with an income of $100,000 and $50,000 in checking savings, that we will be paying $8,000 to attend Harvard. They will actually step up and provide us $72,463 of grant money. I may be thinking, well, Ed, that's great if you can get into Harvard, because obviously 3% acceptance rate is very low, very difficult to get in. So how is this helpful for all of us here on the call? Very simple. Harvard is not the only school this generous, believe it or not. There's many schools as generous as this, or at least pretty close to this generosity. Loyola, all 4 Loyolas are almost as generous. Schools like Notre Dame, Bucknell, Gettysburg, Franklin and Marshall, Muhlenberg, almost as generous as well. Providence, BU, Northeastern, almost as generous. Fairleigh Dickinson, Seton Hall, Rider, Centenary. So I'm not talking about it has to be 3% acceptance rate. It can be way more acceptance rate higher than that. And they're very generous as colleges out there. And the way you would know that is by doing your schools of your list, their net price calculators. That's the goal for you guys, to get informed to figuring out which colleges are generous and which colleges are not generous. Which brings us to the marital status. When it comes to the marital status, if you are divorced or separated, they're only going to count one parent's information if you're divorced or separated for the FAFSA form. Now, the FAFSA form itself is used by every college for financial aid consideration. Some schools, however, unfortunately, if you are divorced or separated, if the school requires the CSS Profile form, the College Scholarship Search form, which a lot of higher end private schools do require, they're going to ask for both your information. Whether you're divorced or separated is not a consideration for them. They want both parents' financial information. Which brings us to another question I get a lot, so I added it to this junior sophomore presentation here. If you're remarried, for step parents, stepmom, stepdad, etc., your financial information, all of it, will count on all of these forms if you're remarried, unfortunately. Whether you adopt a student or not, doesn't matter. Whether they take your name or not, doesn't matter. If you've been married a week, doesn't matter. As long as you're married, your information as a step parent will go on, will be counted, unfortunately, on the financial aid forms. That being said, let's talk about social media, the bane of existence of your student on the admissions side, let's call it. Now, when it comes to social media, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, all of it, okay, social media is not your friend to your student. And I mean, I think that's across the board, no matter what realm we're talking about. But in the world of admissions, is even worse from this perspective. If your student is posting anything online that's even slightly offensive, I mean, like even slightly offensive, like they say they hate Coca-Cola because of all the sugar, just like this most minute offensiveness. Or if it's anything they're doing is immature. And obviously, as parents, we know what is immature. Maybe your student doesn't, but we do as parents. You got to make sure that site is private from this perspective. Admissions offices are going on social media. They may tell you they're not, and not every office is, but a lot more are than ever before from this perspective. The reason admissions offices are going online is to get a better perspective of your student, not to get them into the school, but to reject them from the school. Let me give you an example. Once again, NYU, 100,000 applications. I guarantee you NYU's admissions office has 8 people, maybe 10 tops. I'm talking about 10 for the world, not 10 for like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, East Coast. I mean the world. So if we have 100,000 applications coming in, I got 10 reps. It means each person's got to go through 10,000 applications, typically by, let's say, end of September all the way through January or so. So we're talking a few months. You're looking at a lot of applications every single day. Now, what's easier for me to do to reject a student or to figure out what students I don't want to apply or have accepted here? Do I want to read your main essay, read your NYU essay, read your resume, read your Common App, read your recommendations? Or do I want to go on TikTok and put your name in? Or I want to go on Instagram and put your name in? And then see if I find something offensive. Because if I'm on the train going into NYU, I could probably reject 5 kids without even like opening up their application, to be honest with you. 5 kids in 10 minutes, that would be record time. So for me, this is what I mean by social media is not a benefit to your students. So for me, if they're doing anything offensive or they're doing anything immature, I'm making the site private. If your student says, I don't want to make it private, perfectly fine. Don't pay the phone bill. It's really that crazy. And I say that half jokingly, but I know a lot of admissions people. Remember, I'm doing this 25 years. I work with, I think, either 80 or 85 high schools a year in presentations. I've even spoken at different colleges. I also consult for colleges. I know a lot of admissions people. And they told me they go on these social media sites. It makes their job easier. And I see why. It makes it very simple. Easy way to reject people. So I don't have to go through all the process of reading everything. I can just reject just by going through my phone very quickly. There's just things to think about when your students are posting things, especially online. Now, for the sophomores and juniors out there, especially the ones that are looking to go to Rutgers, and this is only for Rutgers, residents of New Jersey, by the way. If you're looking to go to Rutgers University and you're a resident of New Jersey, one of the best things that's happened to Rutgers in probably decades is the Scarlet Guarantee Program. Now, Rutgers came out with this about a year ago. We actually put an entire video about this on YouTube, explaining the whole thing, how it works, what forms you have to get in, the deadlines and everything else. So if you want more information about this, just go on YouTube. We have the Scarlet Guarantee video on there. Now, when it comes to Scarlet Guarantee, the way it works is phenomenal. If you're a New Jersey student, a resident, and you're applying to Rutgers and you get in, and the parents have an adjusted gross income of $80,000 to $100,000, you're paying $5,000 in tuition. That is essentially a 60%, almost a 70%, depending on your program, discount, massive discount. If you make 80 to 65,000, you're only paying $3,000. In some cases, depending on your program, almost a 90% reduction in cost. If your adjusted gross is 65,000 or below, you guys aren't paying a single dime for tuition. It's an amazing, amazing program that Rutgers put into place in the last year. Now, with everything in the world of financial aid admissions, as I mentioned before in the other topics, there's always a good and there's a counter of the bad. The good is, if you're in this realm here, you're saving a ton of money. Rutgers can be one of the schools, even if your student lives on campus and you fall into the categories, you could very likely go have your student go off to Rutgers for all 4 years and very likely pay less than you would for a top tier school just for 1 year in the 4 years. It's amazing the cost savings here. Now, the negative here is this is going to skyrocket applications. So if you're considering applying to Rutgers, you got to apply early. You cannot wait till the day before it's due or submit stuff for regular application after January 1st. You're not going to get in. I can almost guarantee you're not going to get in because almost every student under the sun whose parents make under 100 grand is going to have their student now apply to Rutgers because of this. The cost savings are just astronomical nowadays, especially with this kind of program in place. So for me, it's one of the reasons I put Rutgers on the slides here. I do a lot of schools, so I'm kind of like giving them free publicity, but I've loved Rutgers education for many, many, many years. My only negative about it was the cost was insane for state residents. Now this completely turns 180 and makes it a very affordable situation. Very good program Rutgers is putting in place here. So if you want to apply early, do not wait. Which brings us to, now, if you guys want, we do have a newsletter. I send a newsletter out every month for parents. If you didn't sign up for the newsletter already through the Zoom meeting, if you want, just email me. I'm going to give you my contact information at the end here. I give a newsletter out for every grade level, not each level. So if you're a sophomore and you want the sophomore newsletter, when you email me saying, Ed, I want the newsletter, just indicate what high school you're from, as well as the grade level of your student. So that way I send you out the right newsletter. Because I also have a junior newsletter and a senior newsletter, and each one is different because it tells you what you need to be doing every single month based on your grade level. I talk about financial aid, I talk about admissions, I talk about basically everything, by the way. Which brings us to the important websites. Now, right at the bat, Collegeboard is a wealth of knowledge. It's also free. So for parents, I'd be on Collegeboard literally all day long, to be honest with you. Gathering information, figuring out, does the school's financial aspects make sense to us? Does the school from a distance factor make sense? Size-wise, major, are we in the realm of getting in? All these questions can be answered for you by going on Collegeboard. It's a great wealth of information out there for you guys. Scholarship searches. I like FastWeb, FinAid, and CapX. These are the big guys I like as far as the private scholarships. Now, if you want to look at local stuff, obviously check with your guidance office because your guidance office will let you know what's available at the local level. And locally, by the way, is always the less competition available. So, but if you're looking to do stuff early on, these scholarships are the private sources. Scholarships are available, believe it or not, as early as sixth grade, all the way to PhD. So you have many, many years of private scholarships out there available. Once again, we do have the YouTube channel. So you just go to YouTube, plug my name in, Ed Zamora. And I would ask if everyone on here could go to YouTube. If you don't watch the videos, but you want to help us out with the scholarship fund, the best thing you guys can do, if you go to YouTube, type my name in, Ed Zamora, there's a play all button on our channel. If you just click on the play all button and just let the videos run, I have a lot of parents. They'll text me or email me the next day. Hey, Ed, I watched 50 videos last night. I know you didn't watch a single video. You basically pressed the play all button and you went to sleep. Or you pressed the play all button and you went to work. It doesn't matter to me what you do. But the more videos that keep going and playing, etc., and the commercials that keep playing, that's where we get all the revenue to give back to you guys in the form of scholarships every year. So the more you guys can help us out with the play all button, the more we give back to you. Which brings us to the family decision and what I talked about in the beginning of the presentation. Once again, you cannot just let your student go crazy and apply to any school they want. And then you jump in at the end, or the tail end, let's call it, let's say maybe November, December, after they've done the visits, the tours, after they've applied, and put all the effort in, and then say to them, the financial aid award didn't come in what you need, you can't go. You got to have these conversations before. I know you think that your student's not listening to you, one in one ear, out the other situation, but I've been doing this 25 years. I've probably easily met 500,000 families, and I'm not even exaggerating. I meet a lot of families every year. In a given week, I usually do 2, 3, in some cases, 4 presentations. So some nights I'm actually doing 2 presentations for high school. So I'm literally, between that and helping, consulting in the colleges, I meet thousands and thousands and thousands of families a year. And the biggest issues are that no one is talking. If you know the school is going to be an issue, for whatever reason, it's too far, it's too big, it's too competitive, it's too expensive, whatever the topic is, discuss that with your student. You have to talk about these things because the biggest issue, and every family asks me this question, what's the thing that no one asks you? What's the question no one's asking that we should be asking? And the answer is, what happens if everything blows up? Let me explain what I mean by everything blows up, because this happens, by the way, every year. The student, after they graduate, I get almost 3 or 4 dozen of these every June or July. Student graduates, everyone's happy from college, and then they want to have a meeting with me, and the meeting is always the same. Ed, we have $250,000 in debt. Ed, we have $300,000 in debt. What do we do? There is nothing you can do, because at this point in time, there's really almost no way to take it off, whether bankruptcy or not, still almost impossible to get off. You're going to have to pay this loan back, which means as a student, you have now essentially mortgaged your 20s. That's what happens, because the standard repayment of any private or federal or state loan is 10 years minimum. Now, if you take out 200,000, I'll do the number even lower, 200,000. I get a lot of 200,000 meetings, believe it or not. It's not a one-off. It happens a lot. At 200,000 in debt, you will typically be paying around 2,300 to 2,400 for the next 10 years as a 20-year-old. Your 20s are gone. I'm just being 100% honest with you. Every student that comes to me and says, I have to go to the school, it's my dream school. If I don't go here, I'm going to die. You're not going to die. But what will hamper you and make you feel like you're dying is the debt you're incurring from these different loan lenders, because the lenders will let you borrow as much as you want, as long as the student's parent is willing to co-sign. Now, the problem there is most parents know what it's like to have hundreds of thousands in debt, i.e. through a mortgage, car payments, whatever it may be. Students do not understand this. And I get this meeting all the time. I'm not trying to be negative on the students, but I see this all the time. The school costs 50 or 60 grand. The student says, let's take out a loan, I'll be fine. I'm going to graduate and make 60,000. What the student doesn't realize is you're going to graduate and you're not going to be making 60,000, because first Uncle Sam wants their cut from taxes. Then you got to pay your health insurance, then everything else. So your 60 probably starts off like 47, 48. On top of that, now the loan company wants their cut. If you're making 48,000 and you're paying 2,400 every month, you're now looking at you're making 20,000 a year to live off of. You're not under the poverty level. You're completely under the poverty level. Like you're a level below the level of the poverty level. You cannot have a life at $20,000. And these are the things as a parent, person who's worked for decades, a person who's paid off credit card debts, student loan debts, mortgages, etc., that you can pass on to your student. Because I tell every student, no matter what college you tell me, there's always a school that's equivalent in everything. Academics, social. The only difference is they're cheaper. So there's always an alternative to go in there and basically allow yourself not to be inundated with debt the way many students are nowadays. Just things to think about. Which brings us to my contact information. If you guys need help or you have questions, you can always reach out. If you want the newsletter, just shoot me a text, by the way. I know my wife thinks I'm out of my mind because, once again, I do like 90 high school. So I don't know, 15,000 people every year have my cell phone number. So you can text me questions. If you guys have questions, just text me. It's the fastest way. I always answer text messages very quickly. If you email me, second quickest way I get back to you. If you call me, I never answer the phone because between the presentations I do for all the different high schools, I get an unbelievable, insane amount of phone calls. And then with YouTube, we get around 25 to 30,000 views a day. So I get a ridiculous amount of phone calls from, I don't know, all kinds of zip codes. I never answer the phone unless I know it's a high school, because I usually have them plugged in or, preset my phone. But the best way to reach me, text message or email if you need help.